Welcome to the Kintsugi Heroes podcast, where we share inspirational stories of everyday people going through different challenges and how they overcome them. Please be aware that the story you're about to hear may have moments of deeply felt emotions and personal experiences. If anything you hear has a triggering effect, please reach out to someone who can help keep you safe. If you love this conversation, please like and share it with your friends so we can continue to share more inspiration and hope to as many people as possible. Now, listen up for our next hero story. And in this episode, I met with the lovely Remeny Armitage as she shared with me her story of giving birth to a stillborn baby. This is a tearjerker episode, full disclosure. Yet it's one worth listening to because it goes into the depths of the journey of loss of a parent, a new mum, and what really goes on, and also how she navigated those days afterwards and how she navigated life and dealing with people, what worked and what didn't, and how people's comments, unintentional, well-meaning comments, made things a lot worse. She talked about her support networks, what got her through, and also what people can do to make things easier for someone who is in her situation. And I'm sure we've all heard of someone who has been through this situation. And often we don't really know what to say or do when someone loses a child. But she gives us all of that, and she came away from it feeling much better for sharing her story in such detail. And I was very grateful that she was able to do so with such vulnerability and care and love. So here you have Remeny Armitage. Here we are, it's another episode of Kintsugi Heroes, and I'm here with Remeny Armitage from the UK. Hello Remeny, how are you?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm fine. How are you?
Very, very well. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really am grateful for you coming along and being open to sharing your story.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Well, this is where I get to hand the mic over, really, and I'd love you to take us back to the beginning. Where does your story start?
Well, I guess if I was to start it at the age of 36, when I was single and looking for the person I wanted to end up with. Of course, it had taken me a while, and I always knew I wanted to be married and have kids. And I'd given up a career in acting, and I'd focused my life on work with the hope that I'd find the right person. And eventually, I did amazingly online. I met my husband, and we clicked straight away. And by the second date, we started talking about children and coming up with ridiculous names for our future children. Slightly bonkers, but it was obviously meant to be. And within 3 months, we were saying we loved each other, and within 6 months, we were engaged. So it was a whirlwind romance, and it was meant to be. During the time, once we had decided we were made for each other, we knew we were getting married, we were saying, well, I wasn't a spring chicken, so it was time to start thinking about children because we both wanted them. So we started trying, and everyone said we were mad. How could we possibly think about getting married and having a wedding with and potentially getting pregnant? But of course, that worry didn't happen. We didn't get pregnant. And we still didn't get pregnant, and we were getting worried. So we got married, and then 3 years later, we were still trying. And eventually, we used our savings for IVF. Went through that whole process, and the first time we tried it, we lost the fetus straight, within sort of the first few weeks, so that it kind of didn't work. We were told to wait for a whole in the next cycle. After and during that cycle, miracle upon miracles, I got pregnant. So we were overjoyed. I'm already getting emotional. And so yes, so I couldn't have been happier. I that pregnancy, we got the checked for all the illnesses, the downs, and everything, and we were thrilled to hear that everything was going to be fine. And we had a healthy baby boy. Got a little video and photos, and everything was going fine. And I was always a little bit worried because I wanted to share it with everyone, but I didn't. I shared it with my closest family and friends, and I was getting bigger and bigger, and obviously people knew, but I didn't do the dreaded Facebook announcement till I got past 25 weeks, and I thought, right, okay, I've got to share this. I'm too excited. I'm going to do it, which I did, even though I felt nervous about it. And then, then one evening we were watching TV, and my baby was getting very active, and I thought, well, look, he was bouncing around and very strong. And then I went to bed, and in the night he went quiet. I knew something was wrong. I had a bath to try and wake him up, and I couldn't. So yeah, that was pretty bad. It was a bad night. In the morning I was in a panic. So we did the dreaded drive to the hospital. And of course, we were told the worst news, that he'd gone, and I didn't believe it. My husband didn't believe it, and it just seemed unreal. I was so wanted for baby. It's gone. So I was 26 weeks pregnant, and then I had to wait 3 or 4 days before we went back to the hospital. So I had to take a pill, and we named him James, and then went back to the hospital and went through labour. But there's a difference between going through labour and the labour pains when you know that you're giving birth to a baby who's not going to be alive. And it was, although he was small, of course, he wasn't helping to get out, and I got very ill. I got a fever, and they thought I might not make it myself. But I did, and I then gave birth, and was left for 4 hours uncleaned, and they took James away, and eventually the midwife came in, and she'd obviously been upset, but she said, because I was in pain and I was still in the bed that I'd given birth, and she said, well, I'm dealing with your baby, and was very uncompassionate, and it was a terrible, terrible time. And then eventually he was brought to me, and we spent time with him, and it was hard, and we were allowed to stay with him for a couple of days. We had a special room, so it was, it was a good thing. We were told about grief midwives, and we were encouraged to reach out to a particular grief midwife, and which we did later on. And we went home, and that journey home was just beyond anything, because we had the car seat and everything, but obviously not with our baby. And then the next, I was on maternity leave. I was allowed to be on maternity leave, and so I took 3 months off. But for the first little bit, I felt so lost and so afraid to go out, because of course everyone knew me as pregnant, and suddenly, I couldn't face the questions, and I felt like I was going mad. I couldn't function. I couldn't get out. It was November, so I was getting close to Christmas, and one of the things that I saw was when we got back, were kind of stars in the sky. There was one star in the sky, and I felt that was a sign that it was James and he was okay. And so from then on, stars were part of my life. I see him as a star in the sky, and so I started collecting stars. So that Christmas, the house was just filled with stars. and my friend bought a star and named it after him. Sorry. But anyway, so those few months were awful, terrifying. But I met a group of women who were going through the same thing as me. It was an online community of lost mums, and we all thought we were going mad in some form because we couldn't get out of the house and we couldn't see people, we couldn't do things, but we had each other. And I think without them, I don't know if I would have survived, because one of the problems was, people would say, "Oh, you'll get over it. It was meant to be. He's in God's arms." I wanted to smack them. It was just, you can have another one, and but it's not James. So yeah, that didn't help. So the only people that really, that understood were people who'd gone through it. And there were lots of, my parents were amazing and my closest friends were amazing. And I knew that I could call them at any time and they were there for me. And so I was so grateful for that. But yes, it was the community of lost women that I'm still friends with today. 11 years later, they are, we refer to each other as FIMPs, friends in my pocket. And I've met a couple of them, but we're still a community of, lost mums, but it's amazing we had each other. So that helped. But that time was obviously incredibly dark. And, I had one moment when I didn't know if I was going to get through it. And it seemed easier just to leave the world and not continue, because I wasn't afraid of death anymore, because I knew that James was going to be at the other side. But I couldn't do it. I didn't do it. But one of the things that we did was we played the song we had for our wedding, which was Lord of All Hopefulness, at our wedding. We played that at his funeral. And I think hope is one word that I will always associate with James, because he gave me hope. Because after he died, there were so many signs that I had to hope I'd have another baby. And I had to believe. And every time I felt particularly bad, or every time I felt like I couldn't go on, something would stop me, and I would see something like a star or a white feather or something. And it was as if he was saying, "Stop, I'm okay and you're going to be okay." And so I sort of started getting hope that I was going to be okay. And then I had a dream sort of 11 weeks later. I was writing a diary at the time, which helped, that I was holding a 9-month-old baby. And I heard a voice saying, "You have to get better. You have to be okay for your future children." And I took that to be James. And because I was writing a diary, I wrote that in my diary. And I got pregnant that week. It was 11 weeks later. So I got my hope. Obviously, that pregnancy was terrifying. Every minute, my son was eventually born, and I was. But throughout the pregnancy, almost every day, I thought he'd die. And he was really quiet, sleepy baby when I was pregnant. So I used to have to try and wake him up. The doctor said, "Get some chocolates, and you can have the chocolates at night. Wake him up." So I did, poor boy. And so I went on, and we had our healthy boy, and we were obviously thrilled. By this time, we'd also found out what had happened to James. He was Down syndrome and had leukemia, which apparently is can be a side effect of Down's. And the doctors had said if he'd survived, he wouldn't have lived beyond 2. So I sort of think, well, without James, I wouldn't have had Luke. And because I couldn't, I would have been in hospital. I would have been living in hospital with my son. And so the fact that Luke was born a month before the year's anniversary of losing James. So Luke was born in October and James was November. Luke means light, which is, of course, I don't know if you know the term rainbow baby. The rainbow baby is the baby born after the storm of loss, light and colour born after the storm of loss. And so it felt right to call Luke Luke. There's lots of Luke rainbow babies, and also Iris is also a common girl's name because, of course, it's the goddess of rainbows. And so my community of mums, all of us who I mentioned before, all of us have gone on to have one, mostly two children, which I also have. I then went on and had Alex, but 17 months later. So I was pregnant almost solidly for 3 years with my three boys, and I think that time obviously was really hard. But James is always part of my life. He's part of who I am, and has made me who I am, and gave me hope, and has enabled me to live the life I lead now. And I'm very lucky to have two healthy boys who are now 8 and 10, and so I'm very hugely grateful to James. And I love Christmas now. My tree always is covered with stars, and so yes, I'm. It was a tough time, but I think those people going through it are, it's not one of the things. One of the people said to me, well, the other mums, was it's not that you get over your son. You don't get over losing your child. You just get stronger. And I think that goes with all grief. Is you grow stronger daily, so you can carry the weight of the grief. And it doesn't go away, and it sometimes hits you at strange times, and obviously it lessens. But James is always part of me, and I can talk about James without crying, mostly, but occasionally it hits, especially like now telling the real story. But it's not something that goes away, and it shouldn't, because it's my son. So I think if I was talking to someone else, any other mother going through something like this, I would say, just remember that rainbows do appear, and remember to try and find a community of other people going through the same thing. And you're not going mad. You're just taking things a day at a time. Don't rush your grief. Let it flow. Find a good grief counselor. Find someone you can talk to who understands you, and also the fathers, because I think the fathers often get forgotten in this situation. And in our lost mums group, quite a lot of the dads 6 months later or so, they were the ones who suddenly hit rock bottom, and a number of the marriages ended because of the kind of held grief that happened. So I think that it's really important to get help, because it's hard to cope with on your own. It's impossible. And so I think that's a key thing.
Wow. So much there, Ren. And you got me very emotional too. I was going to ask about Des. How did he cope with the news when you first found out that James had passed inside the womb, and then, 3 months later, when you were home from work and dealing with your grief, how was the journey for him?
It's hard. He was, he was incredible when I was going through, the birth and things, and he didn't leave my side. And throughout the time, straight after and on, he was, very supportive, but, he had to deal with it himself as well. And, I think with hardcore grief, kind of as much as you might have each other, you're also on your own. And I think we grieve differently. And I think that's something that the grief counsellor talked to us about, was the fact that men and women do grieve differently. And as a woman, it's not unusual to continue to talk about your child forever and to want to share the story. But for a man or for Des, it's harder. And I don't think that, he doesn't like talking about it. He sort of, he's like, I moved into the future now. I don't need to think about that part of my life because it's sad. And my parents are the same. They don't want to talk about it, and talk about James. And I think people thought, especially that generation, I should be over it, within a year or something, fair enough the first year, but I shouldn't be talking about it. And, I was over the top and, I should be over it. I don't, I don't think, like I said, you don't get over it, but I'm a lot stronger. And, I'm grateful for the time I had with him, James, and I'm grateful for what he's done for me. So he's always my son. He's always with me. I think that was another point. It reminds me that I remember one of the things that I was afraid of was moving forward, and living without him. And I think there was a point, and I don't know when. Obviously, it was early on, but trying to, laughing again and living again just didn't seem real. It didn't seem possible. And then I can't remember what it was that kind of triggered it, but I suddenly realized that James was with me always. He was always going to be part of me. And so I could move forward because he was going to be with me. He wasn't going anywhere. But at first bit was really hard because I felt that I couldn't move forward because it meant that I was going to forget him. But of course that was ridiculous because I'm never going to forget him because he's always going to be part of me. And he is, so thank God I managed to find that. And he was always part of me. And he is. So yes, again, I think, speaking to, and I've tried to support other lost mums since, but that is something I've tried to tell others, is that your son will be with you, your child will always be with you. You don't have to feel like you're leaving your child. Because you're not. Sorry. Yeah.
Don't apologise for the tears, Rem. I think that me and everyone else listening is probably reaching for a tissue right now, if they haven't already. How did you go getting back into the world again? You took the 3 months off work. How hard was it for you to reintegrate into your life again?
It was really hard. So I went back to work I lost him in November, and then I slowly started going back to work. I think towards the end of January. I could have taken the whole year out if I wanted to, because by law I was past 24 weeks, can take a whole year. So it's kind of strange though, being on maternity leave without a baby. But my work were very good, and that they had they let me come back slowly over a few days a week, and I had friends supporting me. I remember my friend Lara being there and walking me back into the office, and of course people were, the last time they saw me I was heavily pregnant, and so it was hard for them. I know that it had a big impact on other people when they heard what had happened, but by the time I got back I was pregnant again. And so it wasn't it obviously that was easier. But the one thing that I remember was everyone in the office was, I worked as an agency, and obviously not on my first day, but that first few weeks, and everyone was running around like headless chickens because they're trying to get proposal out, and it was all a big deal, and everyone was stress, and I was thinking, seriously, really, are you really stressed about something as sort of stupid as this? And then there was one point when my manager was kind of saying, well, you haven't done this, or you haven't done that, or whatever. And my friend Lara was just beside herself with fury on my behalf. We went into a meeting room, And she basically told the manager off. I was not caring a bit because I was like, well, so what? I've dealt with bigger things than this. It didn't bother me, but she was furious. I think she ended up crying. She was so angry on my behalf. We're still friends, and funny enough, I'm still friends with the manager as well. But it was funny because everyone was so kind of obviously work was important at that time. But I went through. I mean, it was a long time. I lost my motion, and like other than dealing with what I was going through, just the small things in life or the things that other people were going through, I lost a lot of empathy, and I became very hard. And it was the way I survived. And people complain about just things that seemed so irrelevant, and I was probably not very pleasant. And I know my best friend Kate was pretty shocked. A few people were pretty shocked at how hard I'd become because I didn't care. I just lost it. I lost who I was. And I think it took a good year or so to get my emotions back properly, and probably more than that. And I was pretty hard for quite a long time. But the walls had come down, and I had to focus on having another baby, and that was my priority, and everything else didn't really affect me like it would have done. I am naturally quite an emotional person, so once the emotions started coming back, I was like, oh, damn, it's quite good not having all those really deep emotions. Oh, but yes, they didn't stay away for too long. But I mean, it taught me lots about empathy and kind of being able to be oneself and things. But yeah, it's getting back into the normal world was really tough. But I think again they talk about a new normal, and that's one of the things that you have to find that. You have to find your new self, because you're never going to be the same person you were before that event or whatever big event. And I think, again, one of the things it's taught me is that when you go through something massive like that, you do change, and you need people who have gone through similar to be able to understand where you're coming from. But, and then looking at other people who've gone through big things, although I haven't gone through those things, I can recognize some of the feelings and the grief, the emotional side, and then just give people space to go, okay, well, I haven't gone through that, but I'm here to listen, you can talk to me. I'm not going to tell you it's going to get better. I'm not going to say you're going to be fine, because you may not be. I think people trying to paper over horrible things, it's just disrespectful. It's hard to hear, yeah, your baby might die, but they might. Life can be tough. There's no guarantees things are going to be fine. But you try and keep hope, I think, is an important thing.
I really like that. And you're right, but I think people trying to sugarcoat things and justify things, but it doesn't actually help anyone. It doesn't help healing, and it doesn't allow someone to actually be in their pain, in their grief. Trying to deny the grief doesn't actually help anybody.
No, you've got to be able to talk about it. And I think that again, I think, if I was saying to anyone who was with people who had, if you were trying to support people who are going through something like that or something big, it's just let people know that you're there and willing to listen. Don't try and say everything's going to be fine. You'll get over it, because, God, time heals all wounds. It doesn't. You can get stronger from it, but don't say it's all going to get healed and you're going to be fine. It's just rubbish. And equally, I think I think I'm quite a positive person now. And I try to look at the bright side of life, and try to have hope and belief that things are going to be okay. You can't live in the thought that everything's going to be awful. But I think it's important to have hope, but also you've got to be realistic about things. And so, yeah, I think the key thing is don't try and make things better. Just do what you can to support the person. And again, during that time of loss, there were 2 people who sent food to our house because I couldn't eat, I couldn't cook, I couldn't do anything. My parents came with food, and then we had a friend who I'd met on the tube who came. I didn't know her that well, but she, for the first couple of weeks, just kept coming with food, home cooked food, and leaving it at our door. And then another friend sent us a big basket of cookies and muffins, and which was amazing because it just meant that we could eat. We couldn't do it otherwise. And so again, I think trying to be practical and don't wait for someone. If someone says, "Oh, well, can I, let me know if I can do anything." No one's, if they're going through something like that, they're never going to tell you what they need because they don't know. You need to just be there, listen, and give them food. So
And cookies.
yes.
I could imagine that when you got pregnant again, it would have been a surprise. Is that?
Well, it was the first time we tried. So, and it was, yeah, I mean, amazing. And it was, it was, as I say, it was a terrifying pregnancy. But I luckily had the community of the other lost mums, and a couple of them have gone through their pregnancies since. And, we were so the big group of lost mums had still going, because of course we've got lost people all the time. But then there were a small group of us who went onto another group of people, mums trying, and then there was a break off of people who were pregnant. I got on the trying group. I was on it for a week, then I got pregnant, so I moved into the pregnant group, and then of course that group broke off again when we had our babies. We're still friends, so there's 12 of us, and we're still connected. And so that really, I think that really helped kind of keep sane. But yeah, that first pregnancy. So the whenever we had the fear, the other pregnancy, the other mums who'd gone through it, we would refer to normals, so normal mums who were slightly oblivious, and then we were the wackadoodles because we were constantly terrified and constantly just completely paranoid, and every tiny thing we would freak out about. But then saying that, again, if anyone's listening who is pregnant, and I'm not saying this to frighten people, but if it saves a baby, I think it's important to say there's 2 things to look out for. And this could have saved a couple of the babies of the loss community I'm in. One of them is if you get any major movement or lack of movement from your baby, get checked. And so James, that last night, he did some huge bouncing movements. I would never have thought to get that checked, to be fair. And he couldn't have been saved because he had leukemia, so but other babies could have been saved. So the high movement, like out of the norm, or low movement or lack of movement, get checked. If you get checked, don't take no for an answer. Get checked, get pushed back. One of my friends went back to the hospital 3 times after being pushed back, saying, no, there's nothing wrong. She lost her full-term baby. And the other one is leaking waters. Is if you think, yes, of course, it's all really disgusting, all the kind of bits and pieces that come with pregnancy they don't tell you about. But if you suspect you're leaking your waters, get checked. Don't wait. Don't think it's something else. It could be serious. And again, another lost mum. I think there were a couple of them lost their babies because of leaking waters. They lost their babies at full term. So if you're listening and you're having a baby, just be careful and don't assume everything's going to be fine just because you've hit the 20-week mark. I lost James at 26 weeks, but more of my friends lost them full term. And healthy babies. So get checked. But that's I don't like saying that too much, but it is a lesson that people need to be aware of.
Thank you for that. It's like you said, it's not about, being pessimistic, but being realistic. These things happen, and we have to be conscious and vigilant. And I love the advice that you've just given about, to the pregnant mums about, those 2 signs, and to get checked. Really important.
Yeah. I mean, the likelihood it's not going to happen. But again, the statistics are shocking. It's something, I mean, when it happened to us, I think it was something like, it's a shocking statistic. It's something like 1 in 7 babies. I mean, it's, and I can't remember what the actual statistic is, but it's much, much higher than people realize. And so, it's not something, it does happen, but it's, I mean, in the UK, it's the worst, of the developed world, it's the worst country in the world for stillbirths. I think that statistic is probably too high, but it is still, whatever it is, it's much higher than you'd expect.
Yeah, right. When you had your next baby, did people around you just assume that you were over the death of James? Did they think, okay, that conversation's going to end, we're not going to hear about it? Was there a view that, oh no, she's moved on now, she's got her baby?
Yes, yeah. Not. I mean, my closest friends know, because I still talked about James, and obviously I had Luke within that first year, so I'm still grieving during that first year and beyond. And so I think people thought, once I had Luke and then Alex, surely she can't still talk about it. But I do. I mean, on Facebook, his birthday, I don't say I celebrate it, but I mark it. And and at Christmas I mark it. I go and I visit, and that first year I visited every day, and then it lessened and it lessened, and now it's it's probably I go every few months now, but it's not, it's not as needed because he's with me, so I don't need to go. But people did assume that, why am I still talking about it? Because he's my son, and that's just the way it is. But so I think some people found it quite hard. But I mean, as I say, I don't talk about him every day. But it's just part of my story. But I mean, I was very lucky because I then went on and had Alex 17 months after Luke. So I had 2 toddlers, or 2 babies at the same time. So it was pretty full on. So I was very lucky.
So do you think they helped fill your heart and your days, of course, with we all know the energy required to look after a baby and a toddler. But did they fill a space, or did they just kind of create their own space?
Alex filled that space in a way. I felt incomplete until I had Alex, and then I kind of, I don't know why. I mean, both Des and I are only children, so it would have been fine if we'd only had one, one child at home. But we said, we wanted to try for another, and we gave ourselves a window of, okay, because I'm an older mum, and I was 40 when I had Luke, and then we said, okay, we need to try and get pregnant by the time I'm 41, but then if we don't by my birthday, then we'll stop. I got pregnant the week of my birthday, so Alex came, and he did, he completed our family. I think I would have felt empty without him. So I think that was a good, I mean, obviously it was wonderful. I had the 2 boys, but one of the things that, again, is a difficult question, I still struggle with a bit now, but not so much. But when people said, or say, so how many children do you have? And, obviously, the normal answer is 2. at the beginning, I would say I've got one or two, depending on when it was when Alex was here. And I'd feel guilty every time I didn't include James. And so I would say I've got two at home. That's how I dealt with it. And then sometimes I would talk about James, but obviously I don't now. I just say two. But, in my head, it was a difficult question. So now I find it very difficult. I don't like asking people how many children they've got. Don't like, because I think it can be intrusive. Or, when people have children with big gaps, don't ask the question, oh, wow, that's a big gap. Because they might have lost a child. Don't assume that they've made that choice. Or I've got friends who, had multiple miscarriages but didn't manage to have children. And, oh, why didn't you choose to have children? Well, how do you know that they didn't try for years? So yeah, I think it's a sensitive topic. It's something people should be conscious of.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you've described the journey and also the relational aspects of the healing journey, and giving us some insight into what's not that appropriate to say, and it makes perfect sense. We do need to be more human and humane and compassionate, I think. And people can be very judgmental but also make assumptions.
Yes.
And when they do make assumptions, then that's where things can go haywire.
Yes.
It becomes quite difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I know that I'm guilty of acting probably like a normal more times than I should now, because it has been so many years that I do probably put my foot in it sometimes and say the wrong things, and but I'm probably a bit more conscious because obviously of what I've been through, but I'm and I do probably say the annoying, oh, everything will be fine, stop worrying. You're not to pregnant people, I don't. But and yeah, because I think it's just normal. I don't think when people say the wrong things or said the wrong things, it always comes from a good place. Generally, I think it's just people don't think, and they don't want to think that there's anything going to be bad coming, so they just say what they think is comforting. They don't realise that actually it's not necessarily helpful, and so I think and people try to empathise, and that's natural, but it's also not necessarily helpful. Like, when a lot of people said to me, and oh, well, I've had a miscarriage, so I know what you're going through. And it's like, I know that miscarriages are, heavy duty. Absolutely. I'm not taking that away. But it's different. And, it's not the same. So it's trying to get the balance of saying the right thing, but it's really hard. If you haven't gone through it, whatever the gone through is, it's very hard for people who haven't gone through it to really know how to handle that.
You've obviously had, like you said, it's been 11 years since you lost James, and you've got this wisdom and you've developed a lot of strength, obviously, in that time. And just hearing you speak, you can see how integrated you are and so accepting of him in your life. And as you say, you never get over it, nor do you want to. He's always with you. There's so much beauty in that, and vulnerability and authenticity about our humanness. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. It shows such a strength of character to be able to speak and share in the way that you have.
Thank you.
So thank you. I wanted to ask you now today, looking back, I mean, you have given us so much wisdom and perspective. What would be one of the biggest things that you've grown or done as a result of your journey since losing James?
I think during the time of losing James, probably the thing that saved me was the kindness of other people, of my closest friends and my family, and counsellors, and also the community of lost people, and the allowance of listening and letting me talk and being there. So I've got I had 4 friends I would bounce off I'd taken turns in having a freak out, when I was going through it. They were there for me. They knew that they would be there for me anytime. And so I ended up, and I think personally, the ability to listen and the ability to maybe be more empathetic and take time for people, was something that I feel that I'm better at, and I try to do more of. And so I ended up, my whole business is based around that now. And so my business is all about listening. And so I listen to people for a living. I interview people's clients to find out what they think about the business that I'm working for. And I want to give people a voice and hear what they say and get the truth from people, and then feed that back so that the business that I'm working for, my clients, can be more human with their people, with their clients and their teams. And I think it's really important to be more human and be more accepting and actually let people be themselves and be honest about themselves, and I think as well, being good in business and in life, and actually don't hang your personality on the door when you go into different situations. Just be yourself. And if you're having a good day, great. If you're having a bad day, be honest about it. So if you're talking to a client and you've got a migraine and you're really struggling that day, tell them. Everyone has problems, and they'll be more forgiving. Or if you're late for something, talk to them and just say, I'm sorry, this is what's happening. Don't hide things. Communicate, build relationships, human relationships. And I think the thing that I learnt from the time with James is that listening and being human and being authentic, I hate the word, but is so important. And actually, nurture those relationships and be around people you want to be around. Don't be around people who are fake and don't care and don't allow you to be yourself, don't want you to be yourself, and aren't being human. So for me, it's all about being more human in life and in work.
What a beautiful gift. Even though we don't necessarily always get gifts from our traumatic events, it sounds like you have been given this gift of this perspective and a way of operating, way of being. And I love it. I love what you said about being more human and being yourself and just being real.
Yeah, because sometimes you have crappy days. And obviously you can't have a crappy day every day, and you do that in your work and your life. And you need to sometimes just put on a smile and get on with it. And actually, whatever the saying is, smile, it actually does help you that day, But, just I think it's just having that honesty in life and the whole, everything we've gone through with COVID. I think that's a really, in a way, it's been a gift. I mean, it's been hell as well, but it's also been a gift of realizing that we're all people, we're all humans, and we've all, we're all, we've got different experiences, and we should be listening to those.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful way to come to an end. You did mention this earlier, but I just want to ask you the question again so it's top of mind for our listeners, Remeny. So if someone's listening to this who is potentially going through or, this similar thing that you went through, what would you like to say to them?
I think give yourself time. Know that you need to give yourself time to grieve. Believe that your baby will, that spirit will always be with you. Don't listen to people who say you'll get over it. It's not about getting over it. It's about getting stronger and finding people who are in the same kind of space that you can lean on, that will hold you up when you feel like you're falling, and that know that that pain of grief is incredibly heavy, and every day or every week or whatever it is, you will get stronger bit by bit, and then you'll be able to carry that grief, and in time you will be able to laugh again and life will come back. But don't think that you're leaving your child behind, because it's not about getting over it. It's about trying to learn to live a new normal, and carrying the grief. I think when your grief gets too much, sometimes it's when people say, "Oh, you'll get over it." That to me is insulting. And time doesn't heal the wounds. You just get stronger, and you will get stronger, and you will get through it. And try to have hope. So many people who've gone through what I've been through have gone on and had healthy babies. I can only think one or two who haven't, but most have. And it can happen. And it's not about having another baby to replace. It's about just believing in a different future. You can survive.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Remeny. It's from the bottom of my heart, and from hopefully all mums listening to this. Thank you for being so open and sharing that beautiful story with me and everyone today. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you. I'm going to add one final thing.
Okay.
Is give your kids and the people you love a big hug in the name of James.
Will do. Your shining star.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Please like and share the show to your friends so we can get this out to even more people. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, please reach out using the contact details below. Join us next week for our next hero story. Until then, keep being you, and remember that we are all heroes in our own unique way.